I was labeled as this type of child, learning disability. I didn't feel like in my high school I was really set up for success. I think one of the problems with remote work, more importantly actually, is loneliness and burnout. And I didn't really have a whole lot of friends. It made me asocial. I didn't talk. You don't realize the suffering you're experiencing. It's like learned helplessness. Actually, my grades didn't change and my quality of life greatly increased, surprisingly. I really reinvented myself in college. I think a lot of people weren't able to do that. You're not expected to be recognized.
Welcome back to another episode of Limitless. Today we have with us Alex Grande. He's the CEO of Recognize. While we're going to talk today about employee recognition and rewards, we're going to talk also about work culture and recognition, engagement, and how to activate the teams and so on. But it's also the story behind Alex and the motivations and the driver. What is it that makes Alex the successful person he is? So a warm welcome to the listeners, and Alex, a warm welcome to you. How are you?
I'm doing well. Great to be here. Thanks, Nick.
That's fantastic. No, I think it's a fantastic topic. I think we just spoke before we logged on today, Alex, about the world we live in now. Many are working perhaps partly remotely or fully remotely. So I'm going to have a lot of questions, and I'm sure the listeners as well. How can we then drive the recognition and rewards and get them engaged when they are working from anywhere? Perhaps we can start there, Alex. Is it a difficult situation to try to drive teams remotely?
I don't think it is. I think it can be a straightforward process, a series of playbooks. We often say your business is unique in what you do that's special, and then everything around it can follow playbooks, right? You shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel to engage hybrid or remote workforces. Obviously, for companies that have transitioned from being all in one office, you're going to have some growing pains there, but a lot of it can be solved through technology, through apps, right? Which will only streamline, make your business better, and give you more data to work off of.
And what's the secret here to make it engaging? Is it the gamification, or where would you say, if you had to pinpoint what is the crucial points that we need to include?
Yeah, sure. Things like recognition, wellness, other kind of cultural programs. It's really kind of tied to being an entrepreneur. You are a product strategist, a product designer, and that includes creating a great product, a great employee experience. It's easy to use. It's easy to find, right? It's visible. The leadership has buy-in into the program. It's being reinforced through internal marketing, newsletter, town halls, team huddles, and really that combination. Yes, gamification is also a really fun driver to bring back that that monthly or weekly cohort, bring people back into it. The right triggers, the right notifications. These are kind of the more complicated things that you can't build yourself necessarily, but you can have leadership buy-in. You can be reinforcing it in Microsoft Teams, and expecting your managers to really be driving it.
And what about generational shifts? And I mean, we have such a diverse workforce now, and they don't respond in the same way. Is it possible then to drive engagement that can fit all, or do we need to tailor it for the different generations?
Well, one thing kind of aside on that is cultural differences. So especially if you're international, someone in Berlin may not receive recognition the same way as someone in Mexico City, right? So those are important things. Age-wise, I think it's really interesting that might be almost paradoxical that the older generation, they'll persevere through figuring out how to do something because they grew up, or they not grew up, but they were around when we had dial-up in the 90s, right? When how slow and arduous things were. But the younger generations want things fast, easy. They expect things. They come from the Instagram generation. I thought it was really interesting learning that Instagram made it so when you chose a picture, they already uploaded it. So when you click submit, it was instant. It seemed like magic, right? That's a lot of engineering to make that work, right? Just as an older person may take longer to figure it out, they will persevere. So I think it's more also just around the culture of the business. So if the recognition program, kind of the darker side of the recognition program, where it can backfire when it can be too cute, right, for the demographic of your workforce. So you need to tailor it to the culture of your business less so to the age group is what I found.
Very, very fascinating, Alex. And you started off with a degree in psychology. How is that relevant for your work now, would you say?
Yeah, it's really interesting, in my life where, I was totally set on a computer science degree. And, I was on Ritalin all growing up, and I didn't really have a whole lot of friends. It made me asocial. I didn't talk to people very much. And when I was 16, I said no more. I defied my parents. I stopped taking it. And I suddenly, computers weren't the only thing in my world. I discovered people and facial expressions and unconscious stimulus and nonverbal communication, which is what made me drive to or getting a degree in psychology. I was immediately fascinated at 16 by the outside world, and so I, I'm very passionate about psychology and motivation ever since then, and it's useful in my work today.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned that you were prescribed Ritalin as a child, but as a teenager, you made a decision to stop taking them. Can you take us back to that moment and maybe share a little bit more of what was it that were going through your mind then as that teenager?
I don't really know exactly what was the motivation. I didn't know who I really was. It was, it's almost like with like in Buddhism with enlightenment, right? You don't realize the suffering you're experiencing. It's like learned helplessness. I just had this sense that I should try something different. That way things were going weren't right, and I wanted to make. There's been a series of moments in my life where I've made these kinds of drastic changes, these kinds of switches, and they've kind of slowed down as I get older. But definitely at 16, something just said to me, the summer before 11th grade, I just said, you know what, I'm going to not do this anymore. My parents were concerned, but actually my grades didn't change, and my quality of life greatly increased, surprisingly.
That's a powerful story there, Alex. I think, and I mean, I don't want to speculate on who should take it or not.
Right, of course.
But we live in a world now where it's perhaps oversubscribed and overprescribed, I should say. It's almost like, and I also hear that it has spread in many of the schools, and some of my coaching clients, the parents, their children are even buying it on the black market because it increased their grades and so on. So that's at least stories that I've heard. I'm not sure what you have heard, Alex, what is happening today with the younger generation.
Yeah, in my opinion, of course, I am not at any means minimizing the effects, the positive effects it can, and with different medications around different forms of ADD. There's all kinds of ADD. It's we unfortunately we've lumped it into one kind of group or maybe two groups. I'm highly functional, and I'm kind of almost too neat to a fault. So these have been, kind of offset some of the, maybe the issues of ADD. There's many positives as well. But in my experience, by stop taking it, for me, I'm better at focusing if I'm able to exercise before sitting down and working, right? Especially in a classroom or conference environment. I go to conferences, I'm always like, oh, I remember this. I remember having to sit still for 45 minutes. I'm better standing, maybe moving around a little bit. I'm still listening, so just having the right environment. It's just hard to specialize for everybody. Obviously in society, it's easier just to give a drug and everyone sit still, right? But I think it's very beneficial and very powerful for a lot of people. This is just personally my experience.
Yeah. So what I'm understanding is that you, as a teenager, decided to take the more holistic approach, and rather than taking the medication, you would adapt your life to exercise, or as you said, stand up and move around. And if it gets too hard, is anything else you can share? Because this is a big topic, Alex. I'm having this conversation in my men's group where parents are wondering what should they do with their children and so on. Anything else that helped you during that time? Because I think that could be a powerful learning for many, apart from what you just shared.
Well, for me, a big thing, one issue with people with ADD is getting things done. We hear that a lot, right? Procrastination. I think two things that have helped me in that is having that kind of almost nervousness around getting those things completed. I really reinvented myself in college. I think a lot of people have been able to do that when you're able to change a context from an environment where you're not expected to be recognized, right? Like growing up, because I was labeled as this type of child, learning disability, I didn't feel like in my high school I was really set up for success, right? And so or in middle school even. So I burned out, I gave up, right? Then in college, I was able to reinvent myself. So a new context, a new place. But two things that really helped me is FIFO, first in, first out. So you have that to-do list. I have my whiteboard even behind my desk here. It's so easy having ADD. Oh, this new exciting thing, this new dopamine rush, this new thing, this new idea. You've got to put that on the list. Great to have those ideas, but don't start it until those FIFO, the things you've already started are completed, even if it's not exciting. And you have to have that kind of nervousness that, and it can be hard. It can be hard until maybe you're 30 years old, right? At least for me, it was a learning process where you're strengthening that muscle in your mind to stay diligent and to stay true to a system.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Alex. So it sounds like you learned how to live with it and how to manage it. And I think that what I'm hearing from you is rather than doing what comes over you, these great ideas or creative ideas, write them down and focus on what you are doing right now, and then you can come back to them later on. Is there anything else that you can see as a connection from your childhood and what you went through then and the challenges there that have shaped you as the person you are today?
That's a good question. Well, growing up, I think in a lot of families, I don't think we're really taught what positive reinforcement looks like, right? It's often, it's uncomfortable to tell someone they're doing a good job necessarily, even with your own family, right? And so then when I studied positive reinforcement in college, and then I think this might be true for other people, is as you go through your career, hopefully you get better and better bosses generally, right? Maybe my early bosses doing, landscaping or construction weren't as great as some of the, higher up, mentor level Silicon Valley people I got to work with, later in my career. But seeing in the early part of my career, bosses that continue to use negative reinforcement, almost like fear factor, like, if you screw up, you're in trouble, right? And so then when I got to work at an incredible company that had a great culture, that had a recognition program, that used positive reinforcement, right? It really illuminated to me the success when you focus on, when you show up and you communicate what success looks like. And then there's FOMO. I want to be successful, right? That's the kind of culture that you want to create. And so that's what I've been trying to seek out and help companies with since I started Recognize.
Yeah, so it sounds like, Alex, your upbringing have shaped you, and now you are also helping companies to do this with others. And you don't have to suffer from ADD or ADHD or something else to be able to find distractions. We are surrounded by distractions these days. There's social media, there's apps, there's all kind of things everywhere, and people are easily falling into bad habits. Addictions are everywhere as well. I'm working myself as a counselor and therapist now. A lot of gambling, gaming addictions, and so on. So how can we then make sure that our workforce, or especially remote work, is actually focused on the work they do? And maybe you can share a little bit about what it is you do at Recognize to address this.
We want to let people do their own work. If someone wants to step away from the desk to working from home, chores. One of the things I love about when I'm traveling in a hotel, there's no chores, right? But that distraction could also be, your phone, Instagram, TikTok, or eating. I think snacking, speaking of addiction, it's more of a mild one, but snacking is a huge issue with remote work. When you're using your brain a lot, you're exhausted, your brain needs a lot of food, and also it's an easy, comforting thing to eat. Then you overeat. But as far as getting people to get what they're doing, to be done, I think really it's letting them choose when to do that. What we do is we very much believe in the EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system, and part of that is process. Part of that is feedback. So if you have the right team, which is also part of it, the right people in the right place, the right process, the right feedback, you should be, and everyone believes in the mission and understands what the vision is, people will be more productive. It's more of a holistic approach Another way is, with our stand-ups, some companies do, lengthy stand-ups every day. We don't believe that's a good use of time. I've been in many stand-ups where it's really just so the manager can get feedback from all the direct reports. And for every additional direct report, it's an extra 5-10 minutes of everyone just looking out the window, not paying attention. So what we do is we do asynchronous stand-ups Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Monday, what are your goals this week, right? And then Wednesday, are you accomplishing your goals? Do you have any blockers on your goals? And then Friday, what did you accomplish? And if you're not accomplishing your goals on a regular basis, that's going to lead to a performance review conversation or a one-on-one conversation. So just doing what you say you're going to do and do it. And that should be tied to, we have quarterly goals and we have monthly goals, and the monthly goals are tied to the quarterly goals. And we report on those every quarter, every month, and you should be meeting with your manager to discuss those as well. So if you want to do it, if you're on your phone at 1:00 in the afternoon for an hour, I don't care, as long as, like right now it's 9:30 here. As long as you're getting your work done. What I love about the MacBook is it does tell you how many hours you've been on the computer. We're not watching people in that way on our team. We know, when people aren't showing up, when people aren't responding to people's Slack messages. Hey, here's something cool that happened to me, or here's a project. See people emoji and responding and commenting, right? When people aren't responding, you message them on Slack and they don't get back to you for a few hours. You look at their calendar, it's completely full with things like dog walking. You're going to have conversations with that person. You want everyone on the right bus. We believe that if you have the right people, the right vision, the right process, you should be able to stay motivated. I think one of the problems with remote work, more importantly, actually, is loneliness and burnout, which is a big problem.
Yeah, and that's a topic that I'm working on. I've written a book, Executive Loneliness, myself, talking about my own struggle in the corporate world, being lonely, being isolated. The higher up I climbed. And it's very common indeed, and especially if someone is working remotely. And I typically say that we used to have the workplace and we had the social connections there. We have coffee, there used to be activities, but for someone who's working remotely, and if they're 100% remotely, then we need to replace those human connections somehow, and it cannot all be just working, staying online and so on. We need some physical connections. What is your take on that, Alex?
100%. Well, yeah, you got to check in with people in the one-on-ones. You got to have that psychological safety that they feel comfortable telling you, "Hey, I'm feeling a little bit left out or lonely." That's always great to go to hear. And we're looking into how to help companies do better one-on-ones. We do feel they're really critical. We feel they're even more critical than employee surveys. And I can go into that, but I think inviting more people to meetings. I know meetings can be expensive. I know people complain that nothing is done in meetings, but when you're a remote team or we're a remote team, actually saving grace are meetings where you have that 5-10 minutes in the front. Maybe there's some jokes somewhere in the middle, and oftentimes people, usually it's in the beginning and the middle. Usually at the end, okay, like, nice talking to everyone. Everyone have a great, rest of your afternoon or whatever. But I like to incorporate more people into the meetings, like, reviewing the product or reviewing marketing, and then, then people can chat and talk, and making sure that you're having meetings and brainstorms that don't involve leadership, that don't involve the bosses. Whenever we have company gatherings, we do a gathering every year where we fly everyone somewhere that they want to go. And, there's a night where they get to hang out without the managers there, right? So those are some things that we like to do. I know a lot of companies are saying, find one meeting, get rid of, that might be true for your organization. Every organization's different, but I don't think we should be afraid to invite more people. I know at some technology companies, they'll have all the programming being done pair programming. You always will code with somebody else because it increases quality. It's a little bit changing now with AI, but that's just another example where you're going to stay connected. You're going to build relationships with people, even if it is over Slack, and then always having those monthly gatherings where it's something fun. We do fun things like a pitch contest, or we'll mimic Wait, Don't Tell Me, the news show, radio news show, or we'll do different types of games. I can go into more of them. But we create some really fun games that we all do together, and that creates community as well. So yeah, it's tough when you're fully remote. I can't go out have a beer with you after work, but we do whatever we can to supplement that.
Yeah. Okay. And what about for yourself, Alex? How do you take care of yourself? You're traveling quite a lot, I understand, and you work also remotely. Therefore, how do you balance your life to make sure you don't suffer from loneliness? And how do you look after yourself in physical shape and so on?
Yeah, it can be tough. I was for over a decade living in San Francisco. I was living in Austin, Texas. These are really fun cities. I'm back home in North Seattle, which, I love being with family and everything like that. But when you work and then you're spending time, your best friend basically is your parents, and it is lonely at the top, right? It's hard to talk with the right people. I love that you're part of a men's group. I think that's great. For me, my connection to the world, I can have friends anywhere in the world, whether it's rock climbing. So rock climbing is my hobby. You have to do it with somebody else. Mm-hmm. So people are always looking for partners. And so, this morning I was rock climbing with my friend who I met at the gym. She was climbing. I just said, she seemed like a strong climber. And it's, by the way, try to find people who are doctors who you could be friends with, because they're nice to have around. But that's my connection to the world. Anywhere I am in the world, I can find someone to rock climbing with. And that is really important to me.
Yeah, great. We all need a hobby also to keep ourselves sane and just to keep away from our digital devices. And I couldn't imagine a better sport for that than rock climbing. I'm struggling to pull out the phone when I'm cycling. I guess you'll be really struggling rock climbing being on your phone, right?
Yeah, people will. If you're belaying somebody on your phone, they will be very mad at you because your life is in their life is in your hands. I think the phone can be terrible from a doom scrolling perspective, but I have friends in Europe, and it is really fun to wake up in the morning and see what memes they've shared with me, what messages they've sent with me, and then I send them things throughout the day, and then I know they wake up and they see it. Or some of my friends in Austin or San Francisco that I'm not, don't get to see as much. It is wonderful to be with a friend again who lives far away and feel like you haven't missed a beat. So I do really appreciate that instant communication. And I have ever since I was in high school with AOL Instant Messenger, where, I was connected to all my high school friends in college and things like that through AIM. So, I am that kind of transitionary generation of millennials where, I had that long corded phone in the kitchen, but then we transitioned to the internet all through growing up. But yeah, I think obviously my perspective is a lot different because I didn't grow up with a smartphone in grade school or middle school or high school. I mean, it's a completely different world depending on who you are, how you use the phone.
Yeah, and I'm fully aligned with you. Even in my men's group, I mentioned we share our daily gratitude list. So it means that I start, seeing lists coming in from around the world as well. From we're 35 men now, so and I pin that on top of my WhatsApp list. So it means I get positive messages all day. And if I forget to write mine, that means I will have plenty of reminders coming in to write mine. Yeah, so I will never.
I love that. I love that.
That's a good practice, right? Well, thank you so much for the positive discussion, Alex. I love to hear about your vulnerability, and it sounds like, the challenges you faced as younger, you're taking them aboard and turn them around holistically for yourself, and then you're passing it on now through your work at Recognize, which sounds like a very meaningful life you're living and a great work you're doing. Is there anything I forgot to ask you, or perhaps any last message that you want to leave with the listeners before we let you go?
Just keep being hungry. Never be satisfied. Keep trying. Don't stay complacent for too long. Life's too short.
Thank you for that message, Alex. Looking forward to staying in touch, and thanks to you and thanks to all the listeners as well.